All praise due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that gave us this iman. All praise due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that blessed us with everything that we have, that allowed us to wake up this morning, gave us iman, gave us the health, the wealth, and all of the resources that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, that allow us to carry out everything that we did throughout the day. And again, all praise due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gave you and I the tawfiq, He gave us the capacity, the capability to come to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to worship Him alone. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept everyone's ibadah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with everyone. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them, assist them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Shaykh made dua, he led us in dua before the sajda of before we ended our salah, that oh Allah, you help them, you accept their martyrdom, oh Allah, have mercy on their children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to experience restlessness out of favor and concern for our brothers and sisters in Gaza. May we lose our appetite and think about our brothers and sisters before we enjoy our food and drink. May we lose sleep when we lay our heads down against our pillows, thinking about our brothers and sisters in Palestine. And lastly, may Allah bless you and I with the worry and concern for the Ummah at large. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Yours truly was asked to be here, and what an honor. Wallahi, what an honor to spend a few moments together regarding learning about the Quran. This is a great ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have throughout the country estimated now over 3,000 masajid. In fact, back in 2016, 2017, I hired a team to go through every state and literally count every masjid. At that time, pre-COVID, it was 2,700 something masajid. And I'm sure we've passed 3,000 masajid. And out of 3,000 masajid, my intent is not to, allow us to look down upon any house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm only sharing this and when we are blessed with the bounty of Allah, blessed with Allah, we should talk about it. How many masajid have a weekly tafsir program? That what I could tell you, and I guess all of us would agree, that not every masjid has a weekly tafsir program. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to value it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this from us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our love for the Quran, allow us to become the people of the Quran, so that we recite it, we memorize it, we comprehend it, we understand it, we talk about it, and through, by all of these things, we become more and more people of the Quran. Yours truly have been tasked to talk about, or to give the tafsir of Surah Ikhlas. There are certain things that we need to cover before we proceed with the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before we step into Qul Huwallahu Ahad. In order for us to understand the magnitude, in order for us to understand how amazing this chapter of the Quran is, there is correlation between Surah Ikhlas, we know it, and Surah Al-Kafirun. See, in Surah Al-Kafirun, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was instructed by Allah to say, and we know that every time we find put in the Quran in its correct context, it is Allah Azza wa Jalla addressing Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to address the people. So in Surah Al-Kafirun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to address the mushrikeen of Makkah, to address the disbelievers of Makkah, that la ta'budu ma ta'budu. This is very interesting. All mushrikeen of Makkah, I would worship what you worship. Whereas this is very interesting, the reason being, because you and I both know that the mushrikeen of Makkah were called mushrikeen because they did believe in Allah. So how do you reconcile between the two? It's a question, right? We find in another part of the Quran, you ask the mushrikeen of Makkah who created the heavens, they will say Allah. But then here in Surah Al-Kafirun, there is this distance which is being created between the Muwahhideen and the Mushrikeen. The beautiful nukta, the beautiful point here is, yes, O Mushrikeen, you worship Allah, and we believers worship Allah, but by definition, what you worship is Allah ascribing partners with Him. And our definition as believers, the Allah we worship is explained in Surah Al-Ikhlas. You see the correlation, you see the explanation. In other words, Surah Al-Ikhlas is in a way explaining the Mazmun, explaining what we find in Surah Al-Kafirun. In a way, it expands on what do you mean? You worship Allah as your strike partners. We worship Allah as Muwahhideen. We find even in various narrations, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam instructed us to recite these two chapters in two rak'ahs of salah in various points. For instance, making tawaf, we find in various narrations that you should recite Surah Al-Kafirun in the first half and Surah Al-Ikhlas in the second half. Perhaps the reason being so that we can contemplate about the Alameen, the different subjects of the Quran. What is Surah Al-Kafirun and then what is going on in Surah Al-Ikhlas. Surah Al-Ikhlas Surah Al-Kafirun have another, you could say, correlation, or there is something else that unifies them as well. See, to give more context, we find in the tradition of the Arab, anytime they had love for something, they would name that thing with numerous names. So in other words, the love, in other words, the number of names that was given was relative to how much love they had for something. For instance, how many names do we find in the Arabic language for a horse? How many names do we find in the Arabic language for a sword? And the list goes on. Similarly, we find Imam Razi, rahimahullah, in his Tafseer, he gives 20 names for Surah Al-Ikhlas. And what's also interesting, Mufassirin tell us that Surah Al-Kafirun is also called Surah Al-Ikhlas. Surah Al-Kafirun also shares the name of Surah Al-Ikhlas as well. Now let's talk about, where was this chapter revealed? There is discussion amongst Mufassirin when and where it was revealed. In some narrations we find that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was responding to a group of mushrikeen and so incident. In some narrations we find Rasulullah was responding to a group of Jews or Yahud. But in conclusion, majority of the Mufassirin believe that this chapter was revealed in Makkah. This is a Makki surah. Now, to jump right in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this chapter. Before we dive in, there is something also very important regarding the virtue of this surah. We find in Sahih Muslim and in Sahih Bukhari as well, various narrations in Sahih Muslim narrated by Abu Darda, also in Sahih Bukhari, we find another Sahabi narrates in conclusion that this surah, recitation of the surah, earns you the reward of 1/3 of the Quran. To paraphrase again, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked the Sahaba radiallahu anhu ajma'in, who finds it difficult to recite 10 ajza of the Quran in the night? According to the response of some of the Sahaba, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, recite Surah Al-Ikhlas at night, you will earn the reward of 1/3 of the Quran. So when we come across this understanding that this chapter is known to be the Surah of the Quran, it means that reciting this chapter, Surah Al-Ikhlas, is the reward of 1/3 of the Quran. It's also important to note that we find various, when it comes to the different types of pleasure, right? So, for instance, to recite Surah Al-Ikhlas earns you the reward of 1/3 of the Quran. Also, if someone else recites actually 10 ajza of the Quran, we also understand that it cannot be the same, if you know what I mean. Right? It can't be the same, nevertheless. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to say, Allahu Ahad. We find the various narrations, which is interesting, that not only, one of the reasons why Mufassirin go into detail about when this chapter was revealed is because of the fact that at various points in the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was inquired about, when he was asked about Allah, when he was asked about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Ya Muhammad, Ya Abul Qasim, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, define Allah for us. Define Allah for us. So Mufassirin explained that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would recite this entire chapter of the Quran to define who is Allah, to explain, to respond to whosoever is asking about who is Allah. So this is bad one. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say, O Muhammad, Huwa Dhamir, Allah, He is Allah. What's interesting is that this is the last time in the tartib of the Muslim that we have today, in the tartib of the Quran, this is the last time the word Allah appears until the end. I was asking, like, when you sit with groups of people, this is something for us to reflect upon. When we come to the house of Allah, when we learn something, it's not only for us to learn, but we also need to reflect upon our condition as well. I was asking a group of youngsters a few hours ago, and many times when I ask the question, it's my own self first. When it comes to, imagine if, sometimes put youngsters in the spot too much, let's step away. If a person is asked to talk about a specific, sports sport, for instance, right? Whichever sports this person is, in whichever field, right? Chances are, relative to how much time this person is investing in that sport, this person could talk about different stats for a very long time, sometimes 5 minutes, ongoing, sometimes 10 minutes. And those folks that really are into sports, they can go on for 8 years. Can you imagine? And this is something for us to ask ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, we need to ask ourselves. I'm asking myself, someone, if you have another human being that you want to talk about, how much time, if you start the timer, how much can you talk about this person's achievements, etc. And beyond sports, like business, like even with people, doesn't matter. But we as believers, we as Muslims, we need to ask ourselves. And if we haven't already, maybe we should ask our friend that we trust, that we have such a relationship with, sit with them and test it. Start the timer and ask ourselves, how much time can we spend in explaining the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How much time can we spend talking about Allah? This is something to reflect upon. And the reason why I'm sharing this is, I'm also in need of this myself. All of us are in need of this ourselves. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran regarding himself. Who is Allah? Who is my Rabb? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَوْ أَنَّمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ مِنْ شَجَرَةٍ أَعْلَامٍ. This is an example, this is a metaphor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala painted for us in the Quran. وَلَوْ أَنَّمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ مِنْ شَجَرَةٍ أَعْلَامٍ. If you were to take, which is impossible, that's why it's a metaphor. If you were to take all of the trees on planet Earth, وَلَوْ أَنَّمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ مِنْ شَجَرَةٍ أَعْلَامٍ. If you were to take all of the trees on planet Earth, and you somehow were able to make them into pens, وَالْبَحْرِ يَمُدُّهُ. Just 2 words, but such profound meaning behind them. And you take the oceans on planet Earth and you turn them into ink. وَالْبَحْرِ يَمُدُّهُ. Imagine you have all the trees in the world as pens on one side. Now you have all of the oceans on planet Earth turned into ink. مِنْ بَعْدِهِ سَبْعَةُ أَبْحُرٍ. Bring 7 more oceans of water. You can begin, the entire creation can begin to write about the greatness of Allah. All the pens will break, and all the ink equivalent to 14 oceans of water will run dry. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says immediately after, مَا نَفِدَتْ كَلِمَاتُ اللَّهِ. The praise of Allah will not come to an end. Who is our Allah? Who do we believe? Who do we believe our Allah is? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us here in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينُ. It is Allah who is al-Razzaq. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we live in a society, at least here in the West, where there's a lot of materialism around us. In many ways, we're always being pulled into this quicksand of capitalism. And we may find ourselves believing in the wrong things. Someone said something very profound. He once told me, Yasir, you can lose your job, but you will not lose your rizq. You can't lose your job. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants barakah in everyone's form of rizq. We never want that to happen to anyone. But if it happens, It is the test of Allah. That's a different discussion for another day. You may lose your job, but you will not lose your rizq. Why? Because Allah is Ar-Razzaq. Inna Allah huwa Ar-Razzaq. Verily Allah, He is Ar-Razzaq. He is the one that sustains. Allah created us. Allah gave us everything that we have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. To share something that may come out as a racist, but it's real. 50 years ago, we didn't exist. 100 years ago, we didn't exist. 100 years from now, we will fail to exist. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا? Didn't time come upon the human being that he wasn't even worth being mentioned? He wasn't even worthy of being mentioned. In the same ayah of the Quran, there is Ithbat and Nafi. There is affirmation and negation of the existence of the human being. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say, He is Allah. And He is Ahad. Now, of course, Mufassirin explain this word that we find in Surah Al-Ikhlas as Ahad. What does it mean? What is the correct context of Ahad? Does it mean Allah is alone? Is Ahad in the name of Wahid? And if it is, then you find 2 pages what the Mufassirin are explaining. That is the implication. That Ahad, Imanai Wahid, meaning Ahad means Wahid. And some Mufassirin went down that road. Then you find Mufassirin that explain that Ahad is a quality of Allah. And the closest way to explain this quality of Allah, that Allah is unique. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. There is nothing comparable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is as if where our imagination ends, because as human beings we can't even. Allah is unique. Allahu Ahad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique. And this is, and what's interesting is throughout the Quran, a few times, this word Ahad comes. But it does not come in the meaning of sifa. It does not come in the meaning of, like, it comes, as Hamzul Hal, for example, in the end of Surah Al-Kahf, etc. But here is the only place in the Quran that we find this word as unique as yours truly would share tonight. It's the only place in the Quran where this word is used as a quality or a sifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. He is Allah. And to continue to share some thoughts on what I mentioned earlier, we find the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, we find in various narrations that they would sit down and they would talk about the greatness of Allah. They would do this, they would exercise, they would do this. And perhaps if we haven't already, this is something that we can also bring into our lives as well. Inshallah. Talking about the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Then again, Allah who's Samad. Allah, who is Allah? He is As-Samad. Yours truly would argue that this is one of those places in the Quran that human speech has a hard time capturing the full context and appreciate this word salah. And again, Allah has been written on it. I remember when we were studying, we were like one of the first times we came across the definitions of salah. I remember us writing down like the two-liner definition under this one word. In that mushaf that we had, where you have a blank line between each line, it's a study part. Jazakallah khairan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. For the both in the hand of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ameen ya rabbal alameen. So, a definition of as-salat is all of creation is in need of Allah, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in no need of anyone or anything else. Again, as-salat means creation. Everyone that is created needs Allah. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in no need of anyone or anything. This is also the reason why we find Allah is Ahad, Allah is unique. Lam yalid, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not, and see, to even bring the words that we find that other religions base their aqidah upon. It even feels strange to bring them to my tongue. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. It's even, to be honest, people that were given Tawheed, people that were given books in Allah, people that were sent prophets, that received revelation, that invited their people towards Tawheed. What do? They fall into this filth. Al-Iyadu billah. Al-Iyadu billah. Allah begot. Allah, Al-Iyadu billah, as if He gave birth. Wallahi, it's even strange to even check in the middle of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We understand that Christians would believe Al-Iyadu billah again, that the kufr nabasha. Isa alayhi salatu is Ibnullah. وقالت اليهود عزيز بن الله. And the Jews would believe that Uzayr was the son of Allah. But let's remind ourselves that it wasn't only these two groups of people that were at a point in time, they were muwahhideen, they did believe in their prophets, even though it was a small number of them. But we find that mushrikeen of Makkah, which, just to clarify, their aqidah was batil. Their aqidah, their belief system was baseless. It wasn't like the Jews and the Christians that they're considered to be Ahl Kitab, people of the book, and then they went away with this filth. It's important to create that degree of separation. The Muslimin of Makkah would believe again that the angels were the daughters of Allah. Something like Lam yalid. Lam yalid. And to go back to what George Trudy was sharing towards the beginning of this session, when Surah Al-Kafirun was being explained, لا أعبد ما تعبدون. O Mushrikeen of Makkah, O Mushrikeen of Makkah, I don't worship what you worship. This is also to be brought into context. That Mushrikeen of Makkah, you believe al-'iyadu billah, and Allah Azza wa Jalla subhanahu wa ta'ala has angels as his daughters, al-'iyadu billah. You claim that you are worshiping Allah, but the Allah I am worshiping, the Allah I am worshiping, He is Ahad, He is As-Samad, Lam Yalid, He did not give birth. What's also interesting is that you see different, if you may, different lanes or different points that you could derive from here. You could split from here. In this context, it is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making rad against the mushrikeen. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is creating a degree of separation from the mushrikeen of Makkah. That y'all claim that I have daughters, but it also applies to Jews and Christians as well. You know, sometimes you come across folks that are Christians and Jews where they, and I hate to say this, you know, just to bridge the gap, they also, you see a woman, right? They also, say, oh, you believe in God, we also believe in God. Right? But I think that our belief system, we have to keep this in the forefront. That respectfully, yes, we have Allah, but in this context, let me ولم يولد. Neither was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala behind. Neither was, again, something very strange to even bring to my lips, to my tongue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was also not given as well. لم يلد ولم يولد. We've clarified the aspect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give birth. ولم يولد. Neither Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was begotten. What is the implication? What do we understand from this? To explain this, I will share, if I may, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just for you and I to appreciate whatever we do, we need to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created time. Think about it for a moment. Allah created time. Whereas our existence is limited with the time. We can't even fathom what it's like. What is what? What does absence of time even look like? You know, I can't. I keep running into a wall. I just can't. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it such that you and I are bound by time. بإذن subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I may, the read of this, بإذن subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think the read is Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was raised to the heaven. And Allah Azza wa Jalla has made it such. Out of His infinite wisdom, and Isa alayhi salatu wasalam is not being. That's different discussion from the right. Allah created time, you and I are bound by time. What does absence of time look like? See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws our attention to that moment, if you may. As believers, we understand that Qiyamah is not a one-phase thing. There are two phases to it. Right? There are two times the horn, the trumpet will be blown. So the first time it is blown, to simply put it, everything in existence fails to exist. Everything in existence no longer exists, it fails to exist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He asked a question. لِمَنِ الْمُلْكُ الْيَوْمِ. The context of this, of this question is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask this question when existence fails to exist, which you and I can't even fathom what that even is like. لِمَنِ الْمُلْكُ الْيَوْمِ. لِمَنِ الْمُلْكُ الْيَوْمِ. For who is the dominion? Who is the king? For who is the dominion today? Who is the king today? You read the tafsir of that question. Existence no longer exists. There's no one to respond to it. لله الواحد القهار. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said himself, لله الواحد القهار. It is for Allah. It is for Allah. There's a reason why I think it's not going to be one-third of the source of Quran. Whatever, this is all those chapters that we've learned since we were children. Perhaps this is the first chapter of the Quran we have memorized. This also happens to be, right, in many circles, in many instances, one of the first chapters a new Muslim memorizes to recite the Quran. And again, two words, whatever you read, what are the implications of this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning. As insane as it sounds amongst human beings when I say this, it's going to sound crazy when I say this, even though you and I, our understanding of time is that when you hit rewind, it's infinite, there's no beginning. But our belief tells us that Allah created time. We can't even grasp that as human beings. And that's one example that I give. Allah created time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what am I planning? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lam yulad, Allah has no beginning. And the interesting thing about this is living beings come into existence through birth in one form or another. There is some type of beginning. There is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this terminology to make this concept relative to you and I, no human being. Your beginning stems from you coming into existence, you being born. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not. And then here's another beautiful thing, subhanAllah. This Quran is for everybody. You know. This Quran is for that person who is educated, who has the opportunity to educate, who did study a few things to begin his or her existence, and therefore this person could delve into these things from different angles and come to that conclusion. Allah and Allah is one. But then this is also very much relatable to a veteran or to someone that didn't have the opportunity of education. There's another thing. For someone that wants to delve deep into this, they're able to do so. But then for someone that didn't get the opportunity of education, a very simple, in other words, a very simple thing. You find in various narrations a Bedouin would come to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In one narration, imagine Sahaba are sitting with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. A Bedouin walks in and says, Oh Muhammad, what is Islam? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam counts the pillars of Islam to him. In some narrations, 4 pillars. In some narrations, 5 pillars. Of course, relative to where Wahi was at that moment, depending on where Islam was chronologically speaking. And the Bedouin would say, okay, I believe, and we just walk out. Very simple, straightforward, no drama, just tell me what it is. So even for that person who does appreciate straightforward, not do that. What does it tell me? My beginning comes from me being born. Oh, okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also not being born, explaining it to a human being that is or her Muhammad. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. There is no kufu. There is no one. There is nothing that is kufu, that is even equal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, I mentioned earlier, ليس كمثله شيء. Nothing comparable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. One way to explain this is, as we find previously in the same chapter, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. That comes in the context of sifa, quality of Allah. It is as if in the same chapter, in the conclusion of this chapter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, remember the ayah in the first ayah? There is no one, in other words, The more you repeat something, the more it becomes solidified. Allah is Ahad. In the conclusion of the first verse. Allahu Ahad. The same Ahad is here. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. In His uniqueness, in His qualities, in His sifat, don't even think about anyone or anything being in any way comparable to Allah. In our Sharia, we are permitted to name our children Abdul, for example, Abdullah, Abdul Rahman. There are certain names we're not, it is not permissible or to name. The sifat, the qualities of Allah, only belong to Allah. Only belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I may, yours truly would say that in this final verse of the Quran, there is a form of reiteration. And from that form of reiteration regarding who is Allah, stems how much hope and how strong of a conviction we need to have in it. The example that I gave earlier a few minutes ago, إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينُ. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is Ar-Razzaq. What does that imply? Allah is Ar-Razzaq. Allah is the sustainer. Oh, mankind, oh human being, don't let it be that you look towards someone else or something else or something which perhaps more relative to us is you see that you are working day and night at your job or at your practice or you're an entrepreneur, whatever it may be. You see with your eyes that you're clocking in and clocking out. You're opening and closing the shutters in the morning and evening. You're doing everything. But negating what you are seeing and what you're experiencing through your iman, believing that it is Allah who is the person. We hear this term, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Shafi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Kafi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives help. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient. What is the takeaway from here? What is the takeaway from here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique, and there is no one or anything in existence that is even comparable to Allah, not even close, not even comparable for it to begin to even be unique to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For a believer, what does this concept push a believer to do? Where does this take a person? Where does this drive a person? Personally, if a Hajj is made, it draws a person closer to Allah. Let me explain through an example. Again, this is simply an example. A 2-year-old child. A 2-year-old child develops enough capacity to run around, play, etc. But when we see, when you observe children, as soon as something goes wrong, what does that child do? It runs to his or her mother. And this is something we see in every single child. Think about that. See, one of our teachers would tell us, and this is something he would practice. He would tell us, a believer, one definition of a believer, is being able to derive the qudra of Allah on you at all times. For instance, paying attention to what a 2-year-old does. When this 2-year-old is in need of anything, basic needs, hungry, run to mom. Thirsty, run to mom. Oh, this 2-year-old falls down, scrapes his or her knee, run to mom. In this, there is an indication, this is something for you and I to take away inshallah this evening. That 2-year-old believes with all of its little masoom and innocent heart, because that is what this child is capable of at that phase in life, that anything that goes wrong in my life, I'm going to run to my mother. In a similar manner, again, raising up this cliche, and we've talked about it. Just as a mere example, وَلَوْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, there is no equal to Allah. There's nothing in comparison to Allah. This should also develop some zeal. This should also develop some yaqeen. This should also develop some conviction in Allah. That, oh Allah, only you are Razzaq. Only you are Ar-Razzaq. You are the only one that sustains. Oh Allah, you sustain me. When you see something is happening at work, or we're being tested by being laid off, or something, searching for a job or whatever, turn to Allah. When we believe that Allah is the Shafi, it is only Allah who cures. Run to Allah. Turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only Allah. Wallahi, I will conclude. Wallahi, it is only worth turning to Allah. We've all tried, intentionally, unintentionally, turning to someone else. And forgive me if this comes out of screen. But it's human nature. You need something from somebody, you call them. The first time they'll answer your call. The second time, it's going to go to voicemail, you're going to text them, they're going to help you out. The third time, you get the point. A fellow human being is always going to be creating that degree of separation. Why? Because that is a form of zulm. That is a form of oppression. وضعت الشيء في غير محله. You were, oh human being, you are trying to solve your problems in the wrong place. You're looking for a solution of your problems in the wrong places. Turn to Allah. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we find grace. The riches is the total opposite. The more we ask Allah, the more we turn to Allah, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with us. We've been sitting here for 50 plus minutes, 55, maybe even 56 minutes. If there's nothing else to take home, if there's nothing else to take home, at least take the following home. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. It is only Allah who is unique in His beautiful qualities. Therefore, logically speaking, it is only worth turning to Allah. And the most effective way to turn to Allah that we find in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is rak'atayn wa qatratayn. Pray 2 rak'ahs of salah and shed 2 tears. Draw from the treasures of Allah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah wa bihamdihi, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa astaghfiruhu wa atubu ilayh. If there was anything that was of any kind of benefit, was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything else was from my nafs and shaitan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our love for the house of Allah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our love for the Quran, love for Islam, love for each other for His sake alone. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with necessary sincerity to navigate life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all with the worry and concern of the Ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our love for the Sunnah. And last but not least, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help our brothers and sisters in Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assist them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aid them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them from ghaib. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stop the hand of the oppressor. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to become rested in our sleep, in our appetite. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to lose our appetite, our luxury, our everything when we think about our brothers and sisters in Gaza. May Allah allow us to wake up in the middle of the night so that we cannot sleep thinking about our brothers and sisters in Gaza. May we become sleepless. That allows us to turn to Allah, making dua for our brothers and sisters in Gaza. And lastly, may Allah bless us all with the worry and concern of every ummati of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whether they are a believer, whether they are a disbeliever. How can every human being enter Jannah al-Firdaus? How can every human being be saved from the eternal hellfire and they can be entered into Firdaus al-A'la? Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah wa bihamdihi,